We're here to talk about risks and regulation, all that good stuff. If you build a crypto product, will you get sued? Will the government sue the crypto industry into oblivion? Stay tuned to find out. We're very lucky to have with us a couple of very smart people on this topic. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We have a regulator and an advocate. Tung, if you can just tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi. My name is Tung Chan, and I am the Colorado Securities Commissioner for the state of Colorado. I started with crypto many years ago in 2015 when I was the general counsel for the Ethereum Foundation. And I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to your questions, Jeff, and the questions of the audience.
My name's Miller Whitehouse-Levine. I work at the DeFi Education Fund. We do research, advocacy, outreach around DeFi policy issues, generally focused right now at the federal level in the United States, do a little bit on the state level and internationally.
Since this is a DeFi stage, we're probably going to go pretty deep on that stuff, Tornado Cash and custody and all that good stuff. But first, just painting a broader picture, you all have probably heard of this Gary Gensler guy, yeah? 3 cheers for Gary Gensler? No? Okay. But also, Gary Gensler's not the only regulator out of there. So, Tung, can you sort of explain your role? There's also state regulatory bodies, there's the SEC. So how do you guys all play together?
That's a really good question. So we have concurrent jurisdiction with the SEC for matters in Colorado. Our focus is the investors in Colorado, Coloradans, and enforcing the laws set by the Colorado legislature. So we have 3 sections. We do enforcement for anti-fraud, and we also have investor education, and then we have examinations of the industry. So if you're already a firm or you work for a firm, you've probably been subject to our exams. Those are the 3 areas. Yeah.
Gotcha, very helpful. And Miller, just go to you because you're the DC guy. What is the deal with Gary Gensler right now?
I don't know. That is the $1 million question. I feel like I've spent days trying to psychoanalyze him. I think that at the end of the day, I think that he is a politician, and it is politically profitable for him to be anti-crypto right now and to kind of bring a sledgehammer to the industry. But that is pure speculation. I wish I could understand his motivations, but I don't.
I will say it's possible crypto Twitter is just a wee bit biased in some things, but Tung, do you think like people are complaining about regulation by enforcement, or people are like, it's sort of like the SEC has been like, guess the rules, and if you break them, then I'm going to sue you. And I think the industry has complained perhaps legitimately that this is not a fair way to go about things. But I mean, you've worked as a regulator. Is that critique a fair one?
Well, I think regulation by enforcement in the crypto area is one that is a very hot topic, and I think that regulation. Let's start by the definition of what regulation by enforcement is. In my view, regulation by enforcement means that there are issues that are ambiguous, or maybe even not defined, maybe not even ambiguous, maybe even further out, like fully undefined, and then the regulators decide to take action without passing a rule or passing laws that set out with certainty how things are going to be determined. So that's regulation by enforcement. Now that doesn't mean, regulation by enforcement doesn't mean I don't like being enforced against and that sucks. Regulation by enforcement is very specific in that there probably should be a statute or rule, and then because there isn't one, regulators take action. And I personally do not support that. I'm pretty much against it. I really think that the public deserves to know what the rules and the statutes are, and then they know what, that's the deal, right? This is the rule, this is the statute, and then we're going to enforce if you break that rule. And I think most people want that enforcement because if it happens against them, they want to be like, hey, somebody stole my mom's retirement, I want you to enforce. So that part of enforcement is really important. I think regulation by enforcement is a really hot topic with regulators, and one that I actually do not support. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that under the Howey test, because you're not sure how it applies, that's regulation by enforcement. That's not. There's still a test, and you should try to apply it. But there are cases, and I think in the DeFi world, you can get all the way to the DeFi end where there's no human involved, it's just a protocol, and then there can be questions that right now statutes and rules do not answer.
Yeah, and we haven't, knock on wood, gotten to the point where there's mass regulation by enforcement in DeFi yet. We'll see what that looks like. I'm sure it's coming. But I do think that, to a large extent the SEC has embarked on that approach to crypto. I think they've never issued a rulemaking on digital assets. Folks go in, ask the divisions how to register. The divisions say, we don't know, which means, good luck, make it happen. We'll probably come back with a Wells notice to threaten to sue you. I think that Gary Gensler's favorite motto is to come in and register. He's always talking, come in and register. It'll be very simple. Just fill out the form on the website. And what they don't say is that coming in to register means shut down because our rules don't envision blockchain-based assets. Kraken being a perfect example. The first time the SEC has ever said anything on staking was via an enforcement action against Kraken, a settlement, so didn't flesh out the law such that it would be clarifying in litigation. And the remedy was to shut down the product completely. I don't think that's a good outcome for the capital markets or for consumers, and I hope we pivot. I think another great example of it is the Hinman speech, which was in 2018. An SEC official laid out this idea that a protocol can become sufficiently decentralized such that it's no longer potentially treated as a security under the securities laws. Gary Gensler, who was not chair at the time, refuses to even say the term sufficient decentralization. Senator Toomey last year in Congress pressed him on that issue. And he wouldn't explain what it meant or even say it because I don't think the SEC has a clear idea what's going on in the space either. So it's unfortunate because all the ambiguity means you don't know whether you're on which side of the line, to the extent the line exists, and that gives the SEC almost limitless ability to enforce against anyone. And that's not the way the rule of law is supposed to work.
Well, since we're at ETH Denver, and I think Ethereum is near and dear to people's hearts here, it seemed a year ago that Ethereum was in the clear. Bitcoin's clearly not a security. It seemed Ethereum was not. But now Gensler's making noises that maybe Ethereum is a security, which would obviously be, chaotic, expensive, a mess. Tung, is there a chance that Ethereum is declared a security? And if so, what happens?
I think the answer to that is that we should be watching the space regarding the Ripple case. So, there's been some talk, rumors that there would be a settlement. My guess is that there will not be a settlement, and this will go through to a conclusion where the courts will give some resolution. So I think that's the place to watch because Ripple actively made an argument that said we are like Ethereum. So now Miller spoke about the Hinman comment, but that's not statute or rule. We know that, right? Hinman said he's not speaking on behalf of the SEC. So there is the Hinman comment that said Ethereum, the ethers are not, at this point in time, when he said it in 2018, are not securities. Will the SEC stand by Hinman's comment? They don't have to, right?
Yeah, they don't have to. And I'm glad you brought up the Ripple case because the Hinman speeches are an interesting element of that. Depending on which stage during the Ripple litigation you asked whether it was SEC policy or not, the SEC was flip-flopping in order to avoid the 68 drafts of this speech from being entered into the record and potentially released publicly. I would love to see those drafts for a variety of reasons. I think, if there are 68 speech drafts around this non-policy statement, it might not be as clear as Gary Gensler's duck test.
I know there's not a lot of love for Ripple out there, but I mean, they are kind of taking one for the team by pursuing this. But what happens if they lose? Or let me put it this way, what are their chances of winning? And I know lawyers always like to dodge these questions by saying it depends, but is it 10%? Is it 30%? 70%? You can go first, Miller, and then just in 10 words or less.
I'm not a lawyer, so I can speculate all I want. Yeah, I mean, I think that I am less hopeful at the current stage of litigation than I would be on appeal, either at Circuit Court or the Supreme Court.
Well, first of all, I would say that I don't know that Ripple's taking one for the team. What happened was the SEC filed an action against them. So they were responding. But what they did was, in their response, they dragged Ethereum down with them. They said, if we're going down, you're coming with us. Now, what will happen in this order, I don't think we have a lot of visibility. Important things will be determined, and one of them will be whether or not the court actively makes a distinction between Ethereum and Ripple. And that should be something that I think anyone interested in Ethereum should be watching for. What is the chances that they do that? I actually have zero visibility. But that's a really important point with that Ripple case. Ripple actively said, our argument is, if we're securities, Ethereum is a security. So if you take us down, you have to take down the whole Ethereum ecosystem. And I think, knowing how federal judiciaries work, I think they're going to try to take a narrower, more precise, more surgical approach. That's my guess. But what will they say? I think they may try to find some distance between that, and that's why we're all watching that space really closely.
Jeff, I also think the important thing to remember here as to why this whole question around whether an asset is a security or not is because if you are deemed to be a security and a court rules in the SEC's favor, the resolution is to shut down. And that makes it existential for all intents and purposes. And I think that there should be a path to compliance that is not shut down.
Well, let's take I'm trying to pick a entity. Well, let's take Coinbase, for instance. Or I think Coinbase tried to issue a coin, right? And if that didn't work, the business would not be shut down because their main business is exchange, right? So you're only talking about if the coin is a security and you haven't regulated and they give you, and you have to do rescission or a fine that is too expensive for you to pay, or you can't get regulated, then that would, yes, de facto mean that your business would go under. But if that's part of your business and you have another function that is not a securities related, you wouldn't be shut down.
I hear you. I think my counter question would be, where is the regulated, compliant digital asset security market in this country? The institutions have such interest in getting involved in this, or at least they did before last year. And one would think if that were a viable path, people would be taking advantage of it.
We have about 8 minutes left, so I want to get into some DeFi. A couple of really interesting cases out there, including against Tornado Cash, which is a mixer of sorts. And I think what they're saying is, I just made some code. This is open source code. Why am I sort of, breaking the law by putting my code out there? And some are saying code is speech. Why are you clamping down on me? I'm just writing software code. Do you buy that argument, Tung?
I think the big question, I think this is a really good point. I think the big question, if you step back further, is who's going to be responsible for something when it goes wrong, right? That's a simple reason why we have securities laws, right? We want to make sure it's fair when you or your aunt or your uncle, your father, your mother, they buy something, they get all the information they know before they buy. That's part of the securities law. And then the second thing is that if something goes wrong, like FTX, we want to find somebody to hold accountable. Now, the question is, when you go to something that's truly DeFi, like you were saying, purely protocol, there's nobody running it anymore. Do you go back to the developers and say, you guys are responsible even though you're not running it and you weren't even the ones who launched it? Do you go to the person who actually launched it? So those are questions I think making those people responsible when they don't have a direct nexus to what's happening, to me, seems unfair. You know, there can be a lot of other facts and circumstances around it. But that is where I think when you get true DeFi, where there's literally nobody hiring a lawyer to protect it, nobody buying ads for it, nobody just making any kind of decisions about it. It's just a protocol that runs. And then something goes wrong. Who do we hold responsible is the big question. And I think right now, we don't have this is the area where we don't have a clear answer. Now, to be fair and to be clear, there are a whole bunch of areas where people are shouting that there's no answers, and there really are, right? Like any kind of intermediary could be held responsible. That is not what we're talking about. But when you take something way, truly just a protocol, who is responsible, I think, is the question. And whether society feels like we should find somebody responsible. I mean, if it's you who lost your life savings, if it's someone you love who lost their life savings on one of these protocols, where would you feel we should go to feel justice? Right? That's the question. We don't want people homeless because they put all their money into a protocol and lost it and have nowhere to go. So that's where, and I think this is where Miller's organization comes in, because you're talking about truly DeFi protocols, right? Where there's no intermediary.
Yeah, and I think that's the unique aspect of the Tornado Cash designation. They didn't go after the developers, at least domestically. Alexi's been in jail in Amsterdam for 9 months without charges. We don't know if that's unrelated or not. But it's a perfect example of a protocol that is going to be functioning on the Ethereum blockchain as long as the Ethereum blockchain is in operation. And I think the unique thing about OFAC's answer to that question, how do you still, in OFAC's mind, accomplish their policy objectives? Their answer was to impose liability on every U.S. person by making it criminal for them to use the Tornado Cash smart contracts. That is an answer, but not one I support.
Well, let's talk about another protocol we know well, Uniswap. That's also decentralized. It's just code, right? But at the same time, there's this guy named Hayden Adams who is, running a company, making money off it and stuff like that. So, as Tung was raising, like something goes wrong, can we just go and grab Hayden and say, okay, you did it? Or how does that shake out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one could. I don't think it would accomplish the policy objective of whatever you're trying to accomplish, because for the same reason that Tornado Cash is going to work forever on the Ethereum blockchain, so will Uniswap. So I think it's a question of how do you go about accomplishing your policy objectives in a new way? It's a separate question in a lot of ways. Hayden could disappear, but I'll still be using Uniswap, and we'll still have the same problems that we did before.
I don't.
So is Hayden in trouble or not if something goes wrong at Uniswap?
Pardon?
Is Hayden in trouble or not if something goes wrong at Uniswap?
I mean, that's the question. I've actually heard people say, you know what, it should be somebody, the coder. It should be the person who actually launched the protocol. I think there isn't. I don't think there's an answer right now. Because we don't. Ultimately, law goes to a feeling of justice, and I think right now we don't know how we would feel about Hayden being the one who's responsible if something goes wrong with Uniswap. I don't know where the justice lies in that right now, because he's not directly doing it, right? So the nexus isn't close enough for us to be really firm on it. So the answer is I don't really know.
Cool. Let's switch a bit and talk about staking. I know we alluded to it earlier with Kraken, but staking, I think there's a lot of people are invested in it. It's supposed to be the kind of turbocharge the industry going forward. But with the recent regulatory actions, is staking now in trouble?
Well, I think this is where Miller and I may disagree, because staking, it's always facts and circumstances, right? So I'm going to say I also have to say that I am speaking on my behalf, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the state of Colorado in any of these comments. But I would say that staking, many examples of staking fall pretty squarely within a Howey test. So, not all of them. And so the ones that do are obviously going to find themselves struggling more with regulators than the ones who don't.
What about like Lido and Rocket Pool? Do they fall squarely in that category?
I'm not going to make an assessment on that.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question, Jeff, is we don't know, which is my beef with the SEC. There is a one-off enforcement action against Kraken. The details of what they were doing are not fleshed out, and so any model beyond what Kraken was doing, we don't know the answer. The SEC could have released something at the same time saying if you are providing staking to third parties, like as a service, if you need to disclose X, Y, and Z, and in Gary's terms, fill out the form online, and you'll be good to go. They declined to do that.
We only have about a minute left, but I'd like you guys to take us into the future. It's 2 years from now. We're at ETH Denver 2025. What does the regulatory landscape look like? I know you can't predict the future, but best guess, is this going to get clarity, and what will that clarity look like? You can go first, Tung.
This is what I do think we're going to get more clarity. I think what's interesting is that in the American system, we have the 3 branches of government, and one of them is Congress. And I think that the political will currently has shifted dramatically because of Celsius, Voyager, FTX, right? In addition to the shift in the political will, I think it's also brought urgency at a different level. And I think because of those elements, my guess is that we would get more clarity maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, maybe 2 years. But I think that we would be looking at more clarity just because you're seeing what I think regulators probably predicted, which is that these new intermediaries like FTX, Voyager, Coinbase, all these new intermediaries, they're still intermediaries. They're just new players. Like in the old, traditional model, the players were Fidelity or Goldman. Now you have these other intermediaries, and you're seeing that they are failing in different ways. And so I think that just the money amount and just the fact that it's causing so many people really a lot of pain brings urgency to the political arena.
Yeah, I think that in 2 years the world will probably look pretty similar to what it does today. But I am always hopeful, forever hopeful. That's why I'm in crypto policy. I think I agree with everything you said about this new urgency in Congress. I think the problem right now is that the range of what policymakers in Congress view to be the appropriate response is vast and difficult to find consensus around. So on the one end of the spectrum, you have, for example, Senators Warren and Brown who want to ban it all. And that is the new urgent task that they took from last year. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got folks like Patrick McHenry, the chair of House Financial Services, who believes that crypto, blockchain, et cetera, is going to have a major part to play in the future of financial markets in this country. I don't know how you square that circle. I guess that's what Congress is for. But I think it'll take a while, and it's notwithstanding that Congress, is hashing this out. Chair Gensler is not going to wait for Congress, and so I think that is probably going to be the name of the game over the next 2 years.
Okay, sounds like we'll have to do this again in 2 years, unfortunately. But in the meantime, hang in there, everyone. And please give it up to our panel for an interesting discussion.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.